Professor Kanji Yukatani is a brilliant pharmaceutical specialist who entered the medical field after his younger sister died from an unknown illness. After pulling several all-nighters, he dies from exhaustion but awakens to find himself in another world. He wakes up to find a maid called Charlotte informing him that he is Faruma do Medishisu, a young boy from a respected noble family of pharmacists. He was left unconscious after being struck by lightning and has been unconscious for quite a while. A confused Faruma asks Charlotte to explain who he is, and she informs him that his father is Bruno do Medishisu, an archduke, and his mother is Beatrice. He also has two siblings, a younger sister called Blanche and an older brother called Palais. However, Charlotte is frightened to learn that Faruma has also forgotten how to practice divine arts, despite him having an aptitude for water magic. She says that in a worst-case scenario, he might be stripped of his noble rank. He then returns to his room and using Charlotte's advice of imagining the concept of water, he successfully casts water magic after thinking of its chemical composition. He continues experimenting and finds that if he understands the basic chemical composition of an element, he can create it with his left hand, while his right hand eliminates substances. However, he is limited only to basic elements and cannot create complex mixtures. Charlotte returns to his room and asks if he also remembers his medicinal training, as his father has a penchant for springing pop quizzes during dinner. She brings him to his private library, and Faruma reads through several of the books and realizes that the current level of medicine in this world is that of the medieval era. During dinner, Faruma is quizzed by his father, and he is successfully able to answer. Satisfied that he has fully recovered, he asks him to continue with his studies. The following day, he meets his private tutor called Hélène Bonnefoy, who instantly suspects something is strange about Faruma. He apologizes and says that his memories were affected by lightning. Satisfied with this explanation, Hélène begins teaching him the basics of divine arts. All noble families have a natural aptitude with magic, and all have a guardian deity. In Faruma's and Palais' case, it is Paniktheos, the god of medicine, while hers is Hydratheos, the god of water. Furthermore, there are 5 attributes of divine arts: fire, water, air, earth, and null, further divided into more complex subcategories. Faruma asks what the null category is, but Hélène says it has not been seen in 300 years. She brings him to a local lake to practice the magic spell Spear of Water, but when Faruma casts it, the power is immense, even without him saying the incantation. A horrified Hélène asks him to place his hands on a divinometer which measures magic power, but to her shock it breaks, which she says has never happened in history. She finds a mark on Faruma's arm which she identifies as the mark of Paniktheos, and she instructs him not to hold a divinometer in front of anyone. Exhausted, she ends the lesson early. On the way back, Faruma learns that when he makes a ring with his fingers and places it over his eye, he is able to spot medical issues, which glows blue, and when he identifies it, it glows white, such as Hélène's sprained finger. Hélène associates this with the divine eye of Paniktheos, able to ascertain and grant medicine to all injuries. She is further horrified after seeing that Faruma has no shadow, causing her to flee. The next day, Faruma's father tells him that Hélène has a high fever and would like to quit effective immediately. He instructs him to deliver a potion and let her to her house, but when Faruma discerns the ingredients of the potion, it is no more than a nutrient drink. Instead, he creates his own medicine which he delivers to Hélène's house. Clad in full armor, Hélène suspects that the potion and medicine are poison, but Faruma reassures her that it is not. Faruma asks her to continue being her tutor, to which she replies there is nothing she could possibly teach him and calls him an incarnation of Paniktheos. Faruma replies that he is unable to control his powers and hopes that she is able to help him do so without treating him any differently. The next day, Hélène appears having decided to continue tutoring Faruma. She takes him to a deserted island as a precaution for his immense magic power, and they begin practicing his divine arts. Back at the mansion, Faruma tests his Eye of Paniktheos on members of the household, identifying underlying illnesses. He learns that if a full recovery from the disease is possible, the glow becomes white upon identification, but if it is impossible, the glow becomes faint. He begins testing his powers, first by creating a cream for Charlotte's eczema. He can produce any solid and liquid if he knows the basic composition. Using the mansion's facilities, he successfully makes a heparinoid cream and gives it to Charlotte. He also gives the rest of the mansion's personnel treatments for their illnesses, and they all thank him profusely. Charlotte explains that they had never received medicine from them before, and most medicines are far too expensive for commoners to afford. Realizing that few medicines actually work in this time period, Faruma resolves to make medicine accessible and affordable regardless of social class. The next day, Faruma learns that Blanche has fallen with chickenpox, and he is warned by his father not to see her, citing that even though he likely developed an immunity to chickenpox after contracting it in the past, a reinfection may occur. Faruma is impressed that he knows this fact, despite it only being confirmed recently in the modern world. He goes and develops powdered acyclovir, a treatment for chickenpox, and brings it to Blanche. He asks her to keep it a secret and spends the rest of the afternoon caring for her, which surprises Blanche, who says that Farouma had never fed, doted, or read stories to her before. When Blanche says she loves him, it pains him slightly as he remembers his own sister who passed away. The next day, Blanche has shown a full recovery, stunning their father. Later, Farouma creates a Leeuwenhoek microscope which will enable him to examine people without using his right hand, as well as bacteria. His father calls for him and says that they have an emergency house call to the Empress, but Farouma notices him coughing. Farouma and his father, called Bruno, arrive at the estate of Empress Elizabeth II, where they are informed that the condition of her lungs has suddenly worsened. Though Farouma is initially impressed by his father's ability to examine her, he is exasperated when he sees him consider the positions of the stars. Bruno then devises a potion which Farouma identifies as an anesthetic due to the smell of opium. When Farouma realizes that they do not intend to cure her, but instead ease her suffering, he uses his Eye of Panic-Theos and identifies her illness as pneumonia compounded by tuberculosis. Because no syringe technology exists in this era, he is forced to develop an oral solution, but its complex structure makes it difficult for him to envision. When he sees the Empress's children come to her bedside and burst into tears, he approaches and asks for her permission to treat her, but everyone around him, including his father, rebukes him, telling him that this is no time for jokes. However, since she was a top practitioner of divine arts herself, the Empress sees that Farouma alone has yet to give up home, and permits him to come up with a medicine. Farouma locks himself in a room and begins creating several medicines so that the bacteria does not build up a resistance: isoniazid, pyrazinamide, ethambutol, and rifampin. To ease the process, he draws their molecular structure on sheets of paper. Bruno bursts into the room and demands to know what kind of medicine Farouma is trying to create, as pneumonia and tuberculosis, dubbed the White Death, is incurable, which impresses Farouma as Bruno was able to identify the illness without the use of proper tools. When Farouma refuses to answer clearly, Bruno attacks him and demands to know the answer once more. Farouma points to his journal and lies by saying it was all revealed to him by Panic-Theos after he was struck by lightning. After seeing the mark of Panic-Theos on Farouma's arm, Bruno realizes that somehow he has been blessed by the god. He allows Farouma to finish the treatment and to bring it to the Empress. Farouma brings the medicine to the Empress, but first, using his microscope and a sample he retrieved from her, he shows her the bacteria inside her, which comes as a huge shock to her. She also shows it to the court physician, who is equally astounded. Farouma explains to her and the rest of the court that the bacteria can be treated, and the White Death, thought to be an incurable disease, can be cured. Although he touted himself on connecting with his patients, he has failed to do so with his son, but he can sense that the Farouma in front of him is not the son he knew. When they arrive, Farouma gives him treatment for his own developing tuberculosis and asks him to continue teaching him, to which Bruno smiles and the two shake hands. 3 months since the Empress's diagnosis, Farouma and Bruno have exchanged a vast amount of information. However, Farouma is warned that although being identified as an incarnation of Panic-Theos may pacify the populace, certain pharmacologists may find his methods as heresy, and there may be an attempt on his life. Farouma leaves for the Empress's appointment, where he is greeted by her son, called Noah. When he asks him what Farouma would like as a reward for healing the Empress, Farouma says he would like to open a pharmacy that caters to all, noble or commoner. During the examination, the Empress thanks Farouma as she had resigned herself to her fate, but he alone brought her hope that reignited her desire to live. When she wonders if she is still fit to rule after being reduced to a pitiable state once, Farouma encourages her, saying that firstly, as a mother, she could never be worthless in her son's eyes. Months later, she makes a full recovery and summons Bruno to discuss Farouma. At a royal audience, the Empress awards Bruno with the territory of Marseille, renowned for its vast troves of pharmaceutical herbs and remedies, while Farouma is promoted from an apprentice to a royal pharmaceutist, surprising everyone. But Farouma is surprised further still when she grants him permission to establish a pharmacy in the capital city. The engineers and stonemasons ask Farouma for